Hello, everyone. Thank you for hopping on and welcome to this very special Woman in Tech Day webinar. My name is Cassandra Sassman and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Career Services and the Manager for Dragon Network. If you don't already know, Dragon Network is Drexel's official online professional development community for students and alumni. Each month on the platform, we host a virtual Power Lunch interview where alumni share their stories from graduation until now. Today's Power Lunch is not only special because it is Women in Tech Day, but because this is our first time doing it in a live webinar format. Our guests today are two wonderful alumni from the College of Computing and Informatics. We are joined by Angela V. Harris, class of '02, the founder and CEO of 2638 Management Group, and Blessing Adogame, class of '21, author and global speaker. Before I pass it off to our incredible alumni, I'll just share a few quick housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat and ensure you send it to everyone so we can all see it. We'll save about 15 minutes at the end of the conversation for our panelists to answer them. Thank you again for being here. And with that, I'll pass it off to Angela and Blessing.
Hi, welcome everyone. So excited to be here with you today.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you're tuning in from. And thank you, Cassandra, for kicking us off.
Well, before we dive in, we want to do a quick icebreaker poll. So we have a question that we want everyone to answer. We want to know, where are you in your professional journey right now? So we'll give a minute for the poll to pull up. And I'm excited to see some familiar faces or names in the chat.
We have some results in.
Okay.
64% said that they're exploring and learning, building skills, and figuring out what's next, which I don't think is surprising at all.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we thought it'd be fitting if Blessing and I both shared our backstory. I know we probably have different versions of it. So, Blessing, do you want to start with your story first?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna try and keep this as concise as possible, but also making sure that I'm giving you enough background to understand where I came from and how I came to meet Angela. So hopefully by my accent, you can tell that I'm not American or I don't have an American accent. And that is because I used to live in Scotland. So I lived in Scotland for 10 years before moving to the United States to pursue my last year of high school and then undergrad as well. And moving from Scotland to the US at the age of 16, I moved at the last year of high school. I became very shy because it's one thing to move schools, it's one thing to move cities, and it's a whole completely different thing to move continents and education systems. And that's what I did. And so my last year of high school in the US I became very quiet because a lot had changed and I didn't necessarily know how to navigate it. And so the last year of high school, I didn't really get up too much. Many people that didn't even know that I was a senior. That is how quiet I was. And so when I ended up starting my undergrad at Drexel, I realized that I kind of need to change that because it wouldn't really serve me much if I was just quiet for the next 5 years studying what I was studying. And because of that, I went into computer science. That was my first major. Because I guess like family background, my family knew me to be a computer person in the household. And so I just thought, well, computer science seemed fitting. So I went into computer science and classes were all right. Not that it wasn't great quality, but I didn't feel like I liked coding and I didn't think that I was good at it. And so I started to explore different majors, ended up trying out software engineering, still had the same thought, but then eventually I stuck with information systems. And throughout that whole it was the course of my first year, I learned that there were many other students that were in the same position as me. They maybe took a computer science class in high school and they were very energized. I want to be a computer science major in undergrad. And they got to whichever university that they went to, or specifically Drexel, and realized that one, it's either too much. Two, there wasn't much of a support system. They couldn't find other students that looked like them in their classrooms. And so they ended up switching to perhaps a less technical major or completely outside of the School of Computing and Informatics. And myself and two of my friends who were in the same boat decided that we wanted to create a change to that. We didn't want others to go in that same route that we went to. Not that it was bad, but we thought that if community was a big part of why students moved or switched majors, then what could we do to serve as that community for others? And so we started a kind of like a student organization on campus to help retain women in tech. And we were pretty visible on campus. We did a lot. And we were that visible that the dean of the School of Computing and Informatics noticed us. And so the dean at the time invited me to a kind of like a round table of alumni and donors to share a bit more about what we were doing for women in computing. And that is how I met Angela. And to quickly, before I pass over to her, I can't remember what was going on at that time, but I was actually not planning to go to this roundtable. I think I was one of the only students there, and I felt a bit intimidated. I was a bit shy still, but I eventually decided to go, and yeah, that's how I met Angela. So I'll pass on to her for her perspective.
Well, thank you, Blessing. And my journey into, I guess, tech and Drexel, I guess, started when I was about 6 years old. I saw my first computer, and I don't know if I knew it was a computer, but I was just so fascinated by it. And fast forward to age 9, my father must have seen something in me, or clearly I was just in his head a lot, but he purchased my first computer for me. And the landscape was a lot different when I was a child. We didn't have computer science education classes. There were no girls or women in STEM initiatives. So I didn't have a lot of access outside of just my personal computer at home and teaching myself how to do things. And I knew from a very early age that number one, I wanted to attend college and study technology. So Drexel was my first choice, and similar to Blessing, just because there wasn't a lot of, I guess, like education or exposure at that time. When I entered Drexel, I started as a computer science major, and found out very quickly that I was not a programmer. Again, I was not prepared because I didn't have formal computer science education in school. I literally taught myself how to do the basic programming language. That's a very old programming language. So I was not prepared when I had to learn C++ and code HTML from scratch my first semester of freshman year. So I really struggled in my computer science classes, and just looking at the course of study for the next 5 years at Drexel, it was like programming this language and programming that language, and it did not sound exciting or appealing to me. And like Blessing, I got curious and started exploring other options and decided to change my major to information systems my sophomore year, and honestly had a much better experience and probably should have been an information systems major from the beginning, but hindsight is 2020. And so entered the workforce and, graduated from Drexel in 2002 and entered the workforce. But even prior to that, my very first co-op, which was at Roman Haas Chemical Company at Fifth and Market, I was one of the first women and the first Black woman to work in their network operations center as a sophomore in college. And I had no idea that that would be a theme for most of my career. I was always the first, the only, and or both. So imagine being a sophomore in college, the only woman on the team of pretty much middle-aged men. So that's something I've always had to navigate throughout my career. And fast forward to 2017, the day that Blessing mentioned, I remember that day vividly as well. It was a Saturday. I had quite a few events going on that day. So I was kind of pushing myself to go to the Drexel event, and honestly almost did not attend the Drexel event, and I was pleasantly surprised to see Blessing in the room. Because again, when you're working in corporate America, being the only woman in the room, all Monday through Friday, I wasn't looking forward to being in another room on the weekend where I might have been the only woman in the room. So I was pleasantly surprised to see Blessing and to hear her story and just to hear so many parallels that we had in our journeys. The fact that we were both computer science majors, we changed majors, sophomore year to information systems. We were both passionate about creating opportunities for other women to thrive based on the gaps or needs that we saw in the industry, and that we weren't afraid to take action. So that's our backstory.
Yeah, I love telling this story because I mean, there's so much to it in terms of everyone comes with their own background, and you never know who you can meet or who you will meet that has a similar background that you can resonate with so much. And the other thing is also that, sometimes we are, I don't want to say scared of opportunities, but as you said, like we had a lot going on that time and we're like, should we go? Should we not?
Mhm.
Of course, either choice I think is valid. But I think the fact that we both decided to go also shows a lot, that we were able to show up and we were able to make
Mhm.
this connection and meet each other. Um, I think that was a byproduct of us just being there, but us being there to share, the things that we've been able to do, and the things that we're passionate about as well.
Yeah. And I would just also add to that. I have a friend, she always says, just show up. And I feel like our story is just the power of just showing up. Again, it's like one day that we both were kind of like, should we go? Should we not go? Here it is, what, 8 years later? Like, look at what it's turned into and morphed into after these 8 years.
Exactly, exactly. I know when I was thinking about going into basically anything outside of computer science, I didn't really, I guess I didn't really understand what representation was. But the first experience I had was seeing a Drexel alum, specifically from the College of Computing and Informatics, Jordan Jobs. She was an information systems major, and I remember I think she did her co-op at PwC or something, and I remember seeing her like on a screen, and I was like, "Whoa, I think that's what I want
Wow.
to do." And of course, then meeting you, I remember vividly we had like a coffee chat in
At
Saxby's,
Saxby's,
yeah,
yeah.
and I remember coming away from that being like, "Wow." Like it's really one thing to meet someone that has similar experiences to you, but when it's someone that looks like you, when it's someone that is like, I guess looking at the mentee mentor aspect, it's like someone that has already gone before you and is able to tell you this is what to look out for. These are my experiences, so that you yourself, as an aspiring technologist or as a woman in tech, you know what to look out for, you know what to
Yeah.
expect, and you know how to um, kind of like protect yourself because it's not
Yeah.
easy. And I think it makes it much more difficult when there is no protection because you're just naive. No one has told you that, oh, it's actually not that very glamorous. But
Right.
this is how you can prepare yourself and still thrive and flourish in the tech industry.
And just to add on to what Blessing said, being the first and the only throughout most of my career, I had to navigate some of those unpleasant experiences without mentors. And so I did the best that I could with the information that I had at the time. And I'm also a first generation college graduate. And by the time that I graduated, both my parents were also deceased. So I was just doing my best to try to survive and thrive. And so, again, when you're faced with those situations, and I had quite a few situations, oftentimes I navigated that just by leaving when I saw that I wasn't getting promoted or a company wasn't seeing my value or my worth, or I was just working in a toxic environment. I decided to leave. But I just wonder how different my career path and my career journey would have been if I'd had the support of a mentor who looked like me or had, similar experiences to me. So as a result of that, I just naturally developed a passion for mentoring. And I don't know if I knew it was mentoring at the time, but as I started to see other girls and women, just because I've been through so many bad situations, I wanted to share what I had learned along the way, and also just be that support that I didn't have when I was coming up very early in my career. So I've always been very transparent about my situations, not to scare people, but just to let them know, like, here's what you may be faced with, but also I'm here to support you and help you navigate that situation.
Of course, you speak from experience because that is how I experienced you throughout my Drexel career since I met you. And I think it's one thing in terms of what you mentioned, like advice, guidance, and things like that. But there's also the financial aspect of it, right? And I know when I was in my, I think, third year and onwards, I was really struggling to pay for tuition because, as I mentioned, my family came at the end of my high school year, and we didn't plan to come to the United States. And because we didn't plan to come to the United States, we didn't plan financially for tuition. In Scotland, you're basically paying nothing for higher education. And in the US, you're basically paying a lot, everything almost. And so there's a lot that I had to navigate, like, how am I going to pay for this next term? And that's where you came in, Angela. And I know it wasn't actually planned for for me to be your first scholarship recipient. So I'm still to this day, I'm very
Mhm.
grateful for that because um, you took what you had and you poured it into this mission and this vision of seeing more women in tech. And I think I'm a testament to what that kind of financial um, help can do. So
Oh, thank you. And you bring up a very good point. So again, I think I shared that I'm a first generation college graduate. Both my parents were educated in segregated schools, so it's not lost on me that the work that they've done throughout the years has afforded me certain, opportunities and certain privilege. And despite the fact that I lost my father at the beginning of my senior year in college, I was fortunate to graduate from Drexel and actually graduate a term early thanks to his fiscal responsibility and his stewardship. But I remember after my father's funeral calling the financial aid office to say, "Hey, here's my situation. Both my parents are now deceased. I've been working part-time for my co-op employer, but I was literally laid off the first day back from my father's funeral." I remember they were like, "Yeah, sorry about your dad, but we have to let you go." So no parents, no job. So I'm thinking certainly there's something that the financial aid office could do because I was getting a small grant from Drexel, but it wasn't covering my entire tuition. So my father was literally paying the balance out of pocket for my tuition. And I remember calling the financial aid office and explaining that whole, situation. And they basically told me they could give me a loan. But this was back in like 2001, like fall of 2001. And the economy that year was not the greatest. So I remember they had told all the seniors, like, hey, the economy's not looking too good this year. On campus recruitment or, the job process is going to be a little bit more harder for you. So there wasn't really a guarantee that I was going to be able to find a job after graduation, but you're telling me to take out a loan when I don't even have a job now. And there's no guarantee that I was going to find a job after I graduated. So that didn't sit well with me. But again, thankfully, my father had been fiscally responsible and I was able to graduate. But that experience planted the seed for me to want to help a student someday because I recognized my privilege in that situation and the fact that I was able to graduate. I didn't have to drop out and just throw my education away. And fast forward to 2014, I remember I wrote down a very basic goal in a Google spreadsheet that says sponsor a child's tuition. And I'm a single woman, working in the tech industry, fighting all the things, the pay gap, all the things. And I didn't really understand or know how someone goes about starting a scholarship because you only hear about the millionaires and the billionaires who are making donations like Oprah Winfrey and, Bill and Melinda Gates. So for the average person, it seemed like it was something that was unattainable. So fast forward to 2017, the idea or thought of starting a scholarship and getting more engaged and giving back to Drexel had been weighing very, very heavily on my heart to the point where it was something I literally could not stop thinking about. And I remember I was in a meeting with someone from Institutional Advancement. They wanted to talk to me about my involvement with the CCI Alumni Board. And I just simply got curious and asked the question, how does someone start a scholarship? And that's when I learned that Drexel has something called a current use scholarship. And if I funded it at $5,000, that I could put specific parameters on it to ensure that it went to a student studying in CCI that looked like me. And so I literally just took a plunge and wrote a check out of my bank account for $5,000 to start the scholarship. And it's just been amazing to see how it has grown and morphed throughout the years. So, what started as one, $5,000 award, which Blessing ended up getting, has morphed into so much more. The latest update that I received was that We have raised over $120,000 and counting. We have 5 students who have graduated and entered the workforce, and we'll be welcoming a new student later this year. And how we got to that $120,000 is just by me, getting creative and challenging my family and friends to donate to the scholarship throughout the year. So I said, for my birthday, like, I don't want gifts, I don't want money, donate to my scholarship. So again, alone we can do so much, together we can do a lot. So that's just a perfect example of it.
Do love that. And I mean, there's so much to learn from it, from the fact that what may have been absent in your life, you can create that presence in someone else's life. But then also, especially when people think about scholarships and giving, they think that, oh, I need to have made X thousands of dollars, or I
Right.
need to be like a millionaire to even venture into philanthropy. But I think what you showed is that you could actually use what you have currently. Of course, you used your own funds, but then you also mentioned the fact that you mentioned to your friends and your family, instead of giving me X present for my birthday, just invest in me as I'm investing in others in a way. And that inspired me as well, not just in terms of monetary things, but just in general. Like there's so many things that we think we need to be before we can actually be, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But what happens if you just tap into what you currently have and then you realize how that can blossom into who you want to be or where you want to go as well? So yeah, it's really inspiring.
And it's just another reminder that we shouldn't be afraid to start before we're ready. Like I don't have any formal fundraising experience. And I remember talking to Drexel in the institutional advancement office. I'm like, hey, I want to raise $5,000. And they're like, okay, let's start small and not, get ahead of ourselves. But thankfully, like when I said that was the year I actually raised $5,000 having no formal fundraising experience.
Yeah, yeah. I think as women, we're very creative and resourceful in that way. And I wanted to ask about, because many of these things, it requires a bit of self advocacy. Like you have to be open to sharing what you do or what you want to do. Um, and so, how has that played a role in your journey?
You know me. I'm an open book, so it's like, how can I not share, what I've gone through? And honestly, I feel like some of the things that I've gone through is because I'm meant to share, and I'm meant to, I guess, like be that person that I needed when I was younger. So I don't know
Yeah,
how not to be this way, to be honest.
I definitely agree. I think um, when I, you know, being when I started being more vocal about what I was doing at Drexel, and I shared it on Instagram, I shared it on LinkedIn, there was part of me that was like, maybe you're doing a bit too much, Blessing. Like, why are you? It felt like I was shouting when others were just keeping quiet versus me actually just talking and
Hmm.
doing what to an extent is somewhat of the norm. Um, but yeah, there were many times where I was just like, maybe I just need to calm down, or in essence, like dim my light so that people don't get
Yeah.
uncomfortable around me. And I did face those issues where people were looking at me like, why are you doing too much? Why are you doing so
Mm.
much? Um, and I remember to a point, I was just like, yeah, maybe I should just go back to being this quiet person that I was in my last year of high school. But as you said, I think when you see others that you don't want to, you don't want them to face the same situations that you face, then
Yeah.
you realize that there is something in you that just wants to protect them, wants to share information so that they have what they need to prevent going in those same like paths as you. So I think it's important for people to realize that it's necessary to speak up, and you'll be heard by the right people. There's some
Yeah.
people that will hear you
Yeah.
and be like, yeah, no, like it's
Exactly.
okay. But the people that really need to hear what you need to say are the ones that will listen. And I think that's what matters the most.
Absolutely. And as you were sharing that, actually this took me back to something. I feel like the times when we are questioning, should we speak up and should we use our voice? I feel like those are the perfect opportunities where we should lean in even more. And it's to give you an example, I believe it was back in January of this year. I did a post about my experience with workplace trauma and specifically just thinking about the higher education professional, Dr. Candia Bailey. She died by suicide. I want to say it's back in 2024, I believe, as a result of her experience with workplace trauma. And I remember going back and forth, like, do I post? Do I not post? Do I write this? Do I not write this? And that post ended up going viral. I think it received like over 20,000, maybe 30,000 views. And so many people were reaching out to me to say, like, hey, I feel seen. Like, your post really resonated with me. I've gone through this too. And again, to think that I almost didn't post that day, but just to see the impact that post made.
Yeah, exactly. I think part of it as well is that there are many things that people just don't want to speak about, but
Hmm.
they know it needs to be spoken about, but they just wouldn't be willing, and that's fine. But I think, yeah, by way of what you mentioned, you see that when you actually do speak about these topics that are important, not everyone wants to talk about it, but when you do speak about it, you realize that a lot of people actually resonate, and a lot of people have been waiting for someone to speak about it. And yeah, in many cases, you have been that person. So.
So I know we had some questions that came in prior to the event. Should we start going through those questions, Weston?
Yes, yes, we can. We can. Let's jump into the one that talks about how they can get paid, um, and sorry, how they can get paid by their worth, especially when people don't believe in them yet. I think the yet is a
Mhm.
emphasis on that, but yeah, we can talk about that.
I think first and foremost, you have to believe in yourself, and that you have to have your own self-worth and know that you are worthy and deserving of being in rooms and going after those positions because most likely you are more than qualified than the person that you're going to be working for. So it's just believing that you deserve to be there and believing that you deserve that salary, but also educating yourself on what the salary ranges are for the positions that you are applying for. So it's like talking to your peers and being open and transparent about job offers. I believe the website Blind is where you can go, or levels.fyi, you can get salary information. So you're going in educated about the salary ranges. And also a lot of states are starting to require employers to post the salary ranges in the job descriptions. And there's also, I think it's called the Paycheck Fairness Act. So it's also just advocating with your local politicians to get acts like the Paycheck Fairness Act passed.
I like that you touched on the financial aspect because yeah, there's not well, I don't want to say there's not much transparency, but I think that there are resources out there for you to get that transparency.
Mhm.
And I would touch on the second part of the question, I guess, that talked about, especially when people don't believe in me yet. I think it's important to come with facts and figures and reasons for people to believe in you. So, yes, you might be in a situation where you're asking for something and you can tell that, well, this person or this team doesn't believe in me yet. So you yourself also have to know that, okay, how can I make them believe in me? It doesn't mean that you have to like people please and all of that stuff, but there are things that you can write down. There are results that you can write down and document so that even if they don't believe in what you say, the facts don't lie. And so you can present them with this is what I've been able to do, these are my achievements, and these are the results that I've been able to come up with. And in that case, you've given them a reason to believe in you. And so sometimes it's not just everyone is against me, but what reasons have you given them to believe in you? And I think having like a some sort of brag sheets can also help. It's kind of like a resume, but you're literally writing all the things that you've accomplished. And then, of course, depending on your audience, you can pick and choose what is relevant to them because it's also important to speak their language. But then it also helps you, it boosts your confidence because when you look at this sheet, you're like, okay, I've actually done a lot. And when you go into those conversations, fighting for what you're worth, you can come up with this brag sheet and say, this is what I've been able to do. And based off of this, this is what I believe I'm worth. So, yeah.
And just to add to that, when you are presented with the offer, don't take the first offer. That you definitely want to negotiate the first offer because they're going to try to lowball you anyway. So you want to definitely come back and counter on all the components of the offer, whether it's like salary, whether it's bonus, stock. And that's where it's important for you to have a mentor or someone that can kind of give you guidance and insights into how you can negotiate that offer. And you'll be surprised. I mean, they may offer you hypothetically, $50,000. You come back and ask for $75,000 and they might give it to you only because you asked. So it's like, don't ask, don't get. Because the men are most likely asking and they're getting and they're not even qualified. So don't be afraid to speak up and ask.
Very true. Very true. All right, let's tackle another question. We can go with the one that says, why do we need and require women in STEM and technology fields in today's business world?
Because women are awesome. Honestly, for me, I just think definitely we deserve to be there and we bring a different perspective. And I feel like we are empathetic and we see things differently. And sometimes when I get so frustrated with certain, I guess like softwares or websites, my go-to answer in my head is because they clearly didn't have any women on the team.
I think, yeah, as you said, and as I mentioned before, I think we bring creativity and we bring resourcefulness as well. We see things differently. And of
Mhm,
course, all of these things are not to say that we or that women replace men in, STEM and technology fields, but there's just not enough women representatives to,
mhm,
add a bit of, add like diverse thoughts or add a dynamic, understanding to certain products or services that are being created out there. Um, so I think, yeah, there's a necessity, there's a requirement for our voices to not only be heard, but to be considered in the things that people are creating and building.
mhm. And also, I mean, the data, going back to data, like there's a huge, shortage of jobs and people available. And I feel like if you would just hire more women, we wouldn't have this problem.
Exactly. I think this kind of goes into the next question, which is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, but question is, what's the current standing of women in tech today, and how are they viewed against their male counterparts?
Mm. Well, the data or the numbers of women in tech have remained flat, in my opinion, for at least the last 20 years. It's typically hovered at about 26, 27%, and the numbers haven't changed. And I know a lot of you on the call may have perhaps attended the Grace Hopper celebration at some point, either as a student or as a professional. I remember reading an article a few years ago. The founder of Grace Hopper, Anita Borg, I think she put out a challenge to the tech industry back in the 90s, like the late to mid 90s, saying that, hey, we need more women in tech. And the numbers haven't changed. And then with the past couple of years, with all the mass layoffs that we've seen, there's data that says, women are overrepresented in the layoffs. So now it's just more important that we do push for increased representation of women in tech. We push for the pay equity and pay access and push for increased leadership of women in tech.
I think that is a great one that you mentioned, the leadership aspect, because if we, or if the data shows, and if we see that, if we're looking from undergrad, master's level, that there aren't many women studying any like technical degree, if we already
Mhm,
see that that number is low, then you now look into the workforce and you see that entry level, junior level professionals, or the women representing that group are low, then you can only
yeah.
imagine that the funnel continues to just
It
decrease.
shrinks. You're
So
right. You're right. Yeah. And just going back to data, I just read an article recently that said 50% of women are leaving the tech industry by age 35. So to your point, Blessing, the funnel or the pipeline is shrinking. So when it gets to that CIO level, it's even smaller. So we don't start doing something now, we're doomed. We're doing. We have to start addressing retention. I feel like a lot of companies focus on hire, hire, hire. Okay, you can hire all day, but you aren't addressing the fact or the reason why women are leaving the industry. And it's because of a lot of reasons. We talked about lack of access to mentorship. We talked about the pay gap. Talked about access to upper level positions. There's bias in the hiring process. For me, I have a master's degree in information technology leadership. Yet when I was trying to move into leadership positions within any of the organizations where I worked, I was often told I didn't meet the competencies for those roles. So here it was, I was advocating for myself and putting myself out there, but my skills and talents were not valued.
I think that's a big issue because there are many moving parts that need to be solved. It can't just be one as a silo because you can now have this era where, and we've been in this era where women are finding their voice and they're using their voice to
Mhm.
advocate for themselves. And it's like, yeah, I believe I can be in this room. But then you enter the room and the environment is just stale. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I've done my part, but
Yeah.
the other part that's supposed to help, it's not doing anything.
And I feel like that is where the culture work comes in on the organizational part. And I feel like a lot of organizations they don't acknowledge that they have toxic leadership, that they have bias in their hiring processes, and they think that they can have you do these, online trainings, and that's going to solve the problem. But it's clearly not working.
It really It really isn't. And I think it's quite ironic because I think in many of these things you just need the experience. You need to have women on your team so you can learn how to speak to them, or how you can speak about them, how you can speak for them, um, how you can advocate for them. It's more of like an experiential learning kind of thing. And then also going back to what you mentioned about leadership and representation, it's one of those challenges that if people are not seeing women in leadership, then they themselves also feel like, well, I don't want to be the first person there first.
Mhm.
And
'Cause
then
that comes with its
two,
own unique challenges and
exactly,
experiences and weight.
exactly,
That's a completely separate topic.
exactly. And then secondly, it's like, well, there's no one up there that I feel like I don't want to say replicate, but look up to kind of like how I saw Jordan Jobs, and how I saw you. It's like, okay, I can see them as professionals in the tech industry. I'm a student now, but because I see them, I can also see myself there. But if you already have, yeah, a low amount of junior and senior professionals and a lack of leadership in those industries, then there's not much motivation that's like, okay, I see someone, or I see a black woman, or I see a
That's
woman
true.
in,
Yeah.
senior leadership team. I feel like I can get there eventually, or that's a desire that I even have. But if there's nothing there, then you're just like, well, I'm good just coasting, and I don't think
Yeah.
that's good enough.
Yeah, I can remember when I was still, in the workforce and, oftentimes looking for new opportunities, I would go to the company's website. I'm like looking at the senior leadership team. If I didn't see anybody that looked like me represented in the leadership team, I'm like, I can't see myself doing well within this organization. Like I wouldn't even apply for those opportunities if I couldn't see any representation in the
Exactly.
leadership.
Exactly. I agree. I still do that to this day. Just let me browse. Let me see first of
Yeah.
all. 'Cause I think it's very telling. And I don't really know what answer they would give if you outrightly ask them, like, why is there no diversity?
Hmm.
Um, but I think from that you can already eliminate the organizations
Hmm.
or companies that you might like, but may not be the best place for you to work at.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've kind of already spoken about this, at least the first part of the question, which is where do you see the industry demand shifting to right now?
Hmm.
But it was
Hmm.
followed by asking what are some good platforms to learn and practice skills for the workforce, and what type of skills are they looking for?
That's a lot. Obviously, AI and automation is really big right now. I know cybersecurity also has like a shortage or a need for more women. So those are opportunities in terms of skills. It's not only about the tech side, like soft skills are really big, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, organizational skills. So again, working with a mentor, taking advantage of this amazing platform, Dragon Network, listening to some of the other power lunches or the other webinars that are available on this platform, getting involved with student organizations, or if you're an alumni, getting involved with the Alumni Association. There's a career services. So just taking advantage of any and all learning and development opportunities that are available for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There are so many resources, and I remember when I was at Drexel, I made a a point for me to take advantage of all of the resources that I'm subconsciously paying for. And so it's like, well, I might as well, you know.
Yeah.
I think to add to that as well, I would say learning how to learn. You mentioned AI, and I mean, the tech industry in itself is so advanced, like it's growing, everything is changing very rapidly. And so I think it's important for everyone at this point to know what it is to actually learn. It's one thing, I think we're no longer in that space where you kind of have to learn one thing and be really good at it. It's not a bad thing, but with how things are changing, you can spend 6 months focusing on one thing, and then by the end of those 6 months, there's something completely new happening. So I think it's important to learn how to learn how to be adaptable and be resourceful in terms of finding answers to questions that you have. Um, Again, when I was at Drexel, I took my classes a step further. So, of course, we had like class projects and things like that. But I knew that in order for me to really learn the content of whichever subject I was learning, I needed to somewhat apply it to my own personal life. So, find a connection. And so I would take whatever topic that we're learning in class or whatever subject that we're learning in class and find a way to bridge the gap between like the theoretical or practical side, but then also what is something that I could actually use in my own personal life. And that helped me to learn in a different way, not just to pass the class or not just to get an A,
Yeah.
but yeah, something that I can use in my own life. And that also helped when it came to applying for jobs and interviewing because I wasn't just a robot, like speaking about, I did this and I did that, but I was able to say, you know, in my own personal life, this is how I was able to apply what I have learned in the classroom. And I think just that thinking is important for the tech industry that you are not necessarily boxed into one thing, but you're able to think wider than the task at hand.
Yeah, I love what you said about kind of like, making it your own. So
Yeah.
just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, like don't go into AI just because it's like the it thing to do right now. Like make sure that you were truly passionate about whatever it is, whatever field or, discipline within STEM that you are pursuing. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it because you're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be happy at the end of the day. It's just not going to work out. So like make sure that you are also, pursuing what you're passionate about and trying to figure out how you can blend that with something within tech.
Yeah. And just to quickly go off of what you just said at the very end about blending it into tech, I think it's somewhat common knowledge that tech is everywhere. Like tech is everywhere in anything. But I think that there's still some sort of misunderstanding that someone can go into tech without knowing how to code. Um, or, you can be interested in medicine or you can be interested in sports and still find a way to, or not find a way, but there are ways that technology is being
Yeah,
used in those industries. And so, yeah, just because you're interested in tech doesn't mean you need to be a software engineer in the tech, like big tech industry, but you can
right.
be a software engineer in the sports industry, or you don't even have to be a software engineer and know how to code, but you can have some sort of there is technical capacity in every single industry that's out there. And so I think
Right.
it's also on us to not just understand that tech is everywhere. And so I need to now all of a sudden be a woman in tech, or I all of a sudden need to be so interested in tech. But if there's something that you come with, there's a really deep passion that you have for I don't know, the hospitality industry or the music industry, I think that it also takes resourcefulness and, as you said, Angela, like mentorship and doing your research to understand how does tech work with that, and then find a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if we have any more questions that we were sent. Actually, there is one last question
Okay.
before we get some more questions from the audience, if there are any. So this is quite, there are a lot of things to this question. So We can pick and choose. But this last question says, how were you inspired to pursue a career in the STEM field? As a woman of color, how can I make my scholarship application stand out from others? What are some key skills you think I would need in classes versus on co-op? And
Mm-hmm.
how can I improve my public speaking skills?
Mm-hmm.
And this part was, what advice would you give to a sophomore like me in college? So there's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can take it one at a time. So how were you inspired to pursue a career in STEM? I think you already touched about it, but if there's anything more that you have to add.
No, for me, like we didn't have things like this as a child. So for me, I was inspired by simply seeing a computer and just having a passion and interest in technology.
Yeah, I like that. Um, for me, I would say, I mean, as a child, I was very good at picking things apart and then putting them back together. And that's why, my family just said that I was a technical, guru or whatever they called it. But that for a long time, I didn't make that connection that, oh, because I'm good at this, I might be good in the technology field. I just knew that I'm very creative in my thinking. And I remember when I was in like the early parts of high school, because I was so creative, I thought that is where, like, that is a like path I should stick on because apparently in my head creativity and tech didn't intertwine.
Mm,
And so I thought, well, I can't be technical because I don't like maths. I don't like the numbers aspect of things. I'm more of a visual learner. So it wasn't until later on, especially with information systems, that I realized that you can actually combine like business or like the people
yeah.
side of things and technology. So that's how I got into it. Um, the next question was, as a woman of color, how can I make my scholarship application stand apart from others?
I'm gonna let you take that one.
um, something that I would say is that many of us think that our backgrounds or stories are not quite unique. I think when it comes to scholarship applications, a lot of us are very used to saying that we need the money because it reduces the financial burden, which it does, and rightly so. But I think it's very important for people to tap into the background that they come from and then also the vision that they have for the future. Because when you think about scholarships, it's like, okay, we have 500 people that are looking for money. They all have that need. That there's no differentiator in that sense. But how did they come about to have this need? And once they um, have this scholarship or once they have this financial help, what are they now going to do after that? If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So to put it in short, I would say that especially in your scholarship applications, be as personal as you can. Like at the end of the day, they are humans that are reading your applications.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to not sound robotic because at the end of the day, you're in a pool with many others like you that are looking for money um, to ease their financial burden. But it's okay to also say that this is where you come from. These are the struggles that you've been having and how exactly this scholarship would help you. Again, I think ultimately what I'm trying to say is that you don't need to sound robotic. Like, I think that there's something that is special about every person and unique about every person. And if you put that into your application, then hopefully the person that reads your application will be able to empathize a bit more than, the robotic, the usual answers that they get. I think that is an easy but not as common like strategy for job applications, but also scholarship applications as well.
And actually, Blessing, as you were speaking, I do have something I would like to add to that. So
Yeah.
this is coming from the perspective of someone who has been on the other end. I've been evaluating scholarship applications, either for the Drexel Alumni Scholarship that we give out and also other organizations. And it may seem very simple, but I remember quite a few applications where students were basically kind of like reusing the same, I guess, like, essay. And I remember one of the scholarships that I was reviewing for, they actually had criteria in the rubric that said the student had to specifically mention the name of the scholarship that they were applying for. And I remember seeing one application where the student clearly had referenced like a completely different scholarship that they had applied for. So clearly they were just doing a straight, like, copy and paste. So make sure that you are customizing. Obviously, you can have like your kind of like standard template, but make sure you are customizing and updating your essays specific to the scholarships that you are applying to, and whatever the criteria is within the application, whatever it's asking for, making sure that your essay or your responses touch on those specific points. And I guess another way to get your application to stand out is to have a letter of recommendation from a mentor or professor or somebody in your community to speak to the work that you're doing.
Really good. Really good. Yeah, I like the perspective that you brought from someone that actually reads these applications.
Mhm.
So next question was, what are some key skills you think are needed in classes versus on co-op?
Well, I'll say on co-op, I guess a skill that may be undervalued or overlooked would just be networking. And I tell all my mentees, like, we're Drexel Dragons. We have a huge alumni community globally. So one of the first things you can do when you're on co-op is to start, even before you start co-op, just go out to LinkedIn, go to Drexel's LinkedIn page, click on the alumni tab, and start looking at the company where you'll be working, and identify your list of Drexel alumni who are working there, and start doing introductions. And when you actually start there, start scheduling 15, 20-minute coffee chats with those people to introduce yourself and learn about their roles and their background. So don't be afraid to network while you were on co-op.
That was definitely one of my top priorities when I did my co-op at Drexel. I think to add in terms of classes, I mentioned it before in terms of like making sure you're actually learning. It's one thing to pass a class and it might look good on the resume, but how how much would it how much further would it take you when you're actually in the job? When you realize that, oh, I got an A in, data structures, but then I actually don't know anything about it when it comes
Mhm.
to putting it to practice.
Mhm.
So I would say, yeah, in terms of key skills, learning how to learn. I'd also say documentation. I think it is good to have, yeah, documentation of all the things that you've learned, the different classes that you've taken. Um, I think, yeah, you never know where or when it might come up that it would be handy.
And just to add to that, I know Blessing talked about the concept or the idea of having a brag book. So even when you're on co-op, that's something, it should be a living and breathing document. So make a list of all the projects that you're working on while you were on co-op, who you work with, what the impact was. So when you graduate and into the workforce, you can speak to all the work that you've accomplished.
Very good. And we're coming to our last few questions. How can they improve public speaking skills?
I would say just practice, and find, safe spaces where you can practice, and that may be taking on a leadership role within a student organization. There's an organization called Toastmasters. I'm not sure if Drexel has a chapter, but it's an international organization. So that is a great space where you can practice and get feedback on your public speaking.
Mhm. I like that. And yeah, that is coming from a very great public speaker herself. So, I would also say something that I practiced when I was at Drexel, again, knowing that I was this shy person, was I would practice my public speaking skills in class. So when a professor would ask a question and everyone is just quiet, I would then raise my hand and speak. Or if we're in a group project and someone has to present, I would raise my hand and speak. And again, you might not think this is public speaking because it's not on a stage or you don't have a microphone in your hand, but it's just your way of practicing how to communicate
Yeah.
and knowing how to communicate to a specific audience. There's a certain way you'll speak to your peers versus how you'll speak to like your professor and present what it is that you're presenting. So again, it doesn't mean that you have to have a microphone phone in your hand and an invoice of like $2,000 for a speaking engagement, but
Mhm.
figure out how in your daily life you can be
Yeah.
more confident in speaking and be able to communicate better. So I think that's a great place to start.
Wow, we only have 5 minutes left. Blessing.
No, I know time just flies. But I think this is a great question to end with. So, and we can perhaps generalize it. What advice would you have for a sophomore or freshman or junior or senior in college?
Wow, what advice? Just going back to kind of what we touched on throughout our conversation today, definitely believe in yourself. Know that you are worthy of being in these spaces. Find a mentor and build your network.
Like that. Yeah, I think mines are very similar. I would say just having that knowledge that you're not alone. You might feel alone, but there are actually many people that are in the same situation as you. You just might not have met them yet. And so find peace or confidence in the fact that there are others that are in your similar situation. Um, I would also say don't try and figure it out all at once. The same way, I switched majors many times and I felt like I needed to put myself in a box to define this is who I am and this is what I want to do. But I think now being post university or post Drexel, I realized that I didn't actually have to figure it out
Right.
all by the time that I graduate because right now I still don't have it figured out. So it's a journey, it's a process. And as you learn from other people, as you find mentors and things like that, they add to this journey that you're walking on and they add perspective and color as well. So yeah, take it easy on yourself and know that you're doing your best.
And maybe you're not meant to fit in a box. Like for me, I always thought I was going to be a corporate professional. Entrepreneurship was not on my radar or my business card, but looking back at my experiences in corporate, clearly, like this is truly where I'm meant to be. So I wasn't meant to fit in the corporate box. It just
Yeah.
took me a while to figure that out.
Right. Exactly. Amazing. Well, those are the questions that we had.
Can we do like one live question? I know we have like 3 minutes left. Does anyone that's on the Zoom have a live question they want to ask us? I guess you can raise your hand or put a question in the chat if you do have a question.
Yeah.
How do you advise students to find mentors? There are many, many ways, and we're here to talk about Dragon Network. So Dragon Network is a great place. You can search the profiles of alumni and, reach out to them and introduce yourself and find a mentor that way. I know LeBeau has an actual mentorship program that is integrated with Dragon Network. Going back to LinkedIn, search LinkedIn, start following individuals or professionals that you admire and reach out to them, introduce yourself, ask for a coffee chat. And also if you are a member of professional organizations, that's another way you can find mentors, because oftentimes those professional organizations, they actually may have a specific mentorship program that you can sign up for through that organization.
I agree. Nothing else to add?
And on that note, I'm about to put it in the chat, but this is a plug for Dragon Network. Make sure you sign up. I think Angela and Blessing are both on there. So
Yes, I
you can
am.
message them there, but do you both want to share maybe other ways to like get in touch with you or follow along with your journey?
Sure, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Angela V. Harris.
Yep. Likewise, also active on LinkedIn. My name is Blessing Adogame, so you can find me there as well.
Perfect. Well, I feel like that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you both so much for such an inspiring conversation, for answering all those amazing questions. Thank you for everyone that hopped on. We had a really good group of folks turn up today. And yeah, stay in touch, follow them on LinkedIn, sign up for Dragon Network, message them there, and you can check out our full Power Lunch series on Dragon Network under the resources section.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.